Dakar. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 p.m. in Lagos. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. We're also streaming on Facebook and on YouTube and worldwide at wadr.org. My name is Atia Winimbila.
And I am Augustine Curley.
Let's start with the headline stories.
Nigeria's Economic Crimes Commission arrests former Power Minister Salem Maman following 75-year conviction for misappropriating state funds.
I'm happy to announce to Nigerians that at about 3:30 a.m. this morning, we arrested Mr. Salem Maman.
Professor attending European Union's Erasmus Plus regional workshop calls for reforms in Africa's health sector curriculum.
Our training modules can no longer focus solely on acute care, infectious diseases.
Togo grants 30-day visa-free entry to African nationals.
An African Auditors Conference gets away in Monrovia to enhance regional audit processes. Stay tuned for details of these stories and many more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
We start the bulletin in Nigeria, where the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has arrested former Minister of Power, Salem Maman, following his conviction over financial misappropriation. The arrest comes weeks after a high court in Abuja convicted the former minister in absentia for allegedly diverting more than 33 billion naira in public funds, equivalent to about $24 million. Now, the EFCC chairman, Ola Olukoyede, confirmed the arrest this afternoon during a press conference in Abuja.
The main defendant was not present. Then he went into hiding. Nigerians will know. The issue of sentencing was shifted. And on the 13th of this month, he was sentenced in absentia. Since then, we have decided to open our intelligence surveillance reconnaissance, looking for him all over the place. And I'm happy to announce to Nigerians that at about 3:30 a.m. this morning, we arrested Mr. Salem Maman.
You heard then Nigeria's EFCC chairman Ola Olukoyede speaking during a news conference in Abuja this afternoon.
Still in Nigeria, the country has received renewed international support in its efforts to combat substance abuse and illicit drug trafficking. Key development partners, including the European Union, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and ECOWAS, pledged their backing for the country's new 5-year national drug control strategy.
Now, this commitment was announced during a National Drug Control Master Plan Consultative Forum held in Abuja today.
The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency says rising drug abuse and trafficking continue to pose serious threat to public health, security, and development across Nigeria and the wider West African region. Chairman and Chief Executive of the NDLEA, Mohammed Buba Marwa, warns that the growing spread of narcotics, especially among young people, requires urgent and coordinated action. Marwa also notes that West Africa remains a major transit route for illicit drugs, with criminal networks increasingly exploiting weak borders and vulnerable communities.
The drug problem is not an abstract concept or a set of statistics. It is a daily reality in our homes, our schools, and our streets. Despite our different backgrounds, our goal is singular, and that is a drug-free Nigeria.
Meanwhile, representative of the EU delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Zisimos Vergos, reaffirms the European Union's readiness to support Nigeria's ongoing drug control efforts.
Let us remember that the fight against illicit drugs is not just about enforcement, it's about building resilience, restoring hope, and securing a future where every Nigerian can thrive free from the shadow of substance abuse.
Also speaking, country representative of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Sheikh Usman Manturi stressed the importance of youth engagement and gender inclusion.
We must move beyond seeing young people only as beneficiaries and instead recognize them as partners, innovators, advocates, and agents of change within their communities. At the same time, women are powerful actors in prevention and community stabilization. A modern drug control strategy must therefore integrate gender consideration across policy, programming, and service delivery, not as an add-on, but as a core pillar.
The 2026 to 2030 National Drug Control Master Plan will focus on prevention, rehabilitation, enforcement, and stronger international collaboration. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
Let's now talk about health sovereignty, which essentially refers to Africa's ability to independently manage and protect health needs without over-reliance on foreign aid and imports.
The conversation is peaking once again after Ghana's President John Mahama renewed this call at a health gathering in Geneva. Abdullahi Hassan provides an analysis of Africa's quest for sovereignty and economic challenges marked by debt burden and poor budgetary allocations, as well as compounding effects such as climate change.
The issue of health sovereignty gained renewed attention following the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed Africa's dependence on imported vaccines, medicines, and medical equipment during global supply shortages. Despite being home to more than 1.4 billion people, Africa still imports most of its pharmaceuticals and relies heavily on international funding for major health programs targeting diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS. Health analysts say the continent's limited pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity remains a major challenge, with only a handful of countries producing medicines and vaccines at a significant scale. The problem is further compounded by weak healthcare infrastructure, underfunded hospitals, and the growing migration of African doctors and nurses abroad in search of better working conditions. To date, many African countries still spend below the 15% national budget target agreed under the 2001 Abuja Declaration. Public health experts warn that without stronger investment in local manufacturing, research, emergency preparedness, and healthcare financing, African countries could remain vulnerable during future outbreaks and global health crises. Institutions such as the African Union and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are now pushing for greater self-reliance through regional vaccine production, stronger disease surveillance systems, and improved cooperation among member states. However, analysts say achieving true health sovereignty will require political commitment, stronger governance, and sustained investment to reduce dependence on external partners and build resilient healthcare systems across the continent.
Abdullahi Hassan with an analysis of Africa's quest for sovereignty amid economic challenges.
Meanwhile, Africa's growing health challenges are placing renewed attention on the need to reform medical education and workforce training across the continent. Despite carrying a significant share of the global disease burden, many African countries still struggle with understaffed clinics, workforce gaps, and limited practical training for health graduates.
Well, this week, the European Union's Erasmus Plus program is holding a regional workshop in Dakar. Today, a professor of epidemiology at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, Ellis Owusu, called for a curriculum revision Africa to solve the continent's problems.
Africa currently carries nearly 25% of the global burden of disease, yet we are forced to manage this burden with only 3% of the world's health workforce. It's a tragedy that nearly 1 million health graduates in Africa remain unemployed, whilst clinics remain understaffed. Why? Because our curricula are often theoretical overloads. The crisis isn't just about the quantity, it is about the quality and adaptability. We're currently seeing a gap where graduates possess theoretical knowledge and indeed access to higher education has improved, but they lack the practical competencies and technological agility required in a modern clinical and other health sectors. Our training modules can no longer focus solely on acute care, infectious diseases, but must pivot to long-term chronic care management and specialized clinical skills. This calls for a curriculum revolution.
You heard there Ellis Owusu. He's a professor of epidemiology at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. Augustine, let's now talk about Ebola.
Yes, especially at the regional level, as the Sierra Leonean health authorities say they are intensifying surveillance and public health preparedness measures in collaboration with other West African countries as a new Ebola outbreak is reported in Central Africa. Additionally, the government is deploying advanced misinformation tracking systems developed from lessons learned during the country's 2014 devastating Ebola crisis.
And do stay with us because Harold Thomas, who is the Risk Communication and Community Engagement Lead at the Sierra Leonean Health Ministry, will provide details of this development during the guest interview.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's now go to Togo, where the government is taking a significant step in its African integration policy. Citizens of other African countries can now enter and reside in Togo for up to 30 days without a visa. This measure aims to promote free movement and encourage intra-African trade. Imo Edet completes the story.
This is a major reform in terms of mobility on the continent. In a statement released Monday evening by the Minister of Security, the Togolese government announced that all African citizens holding a valid national passport are now exempted from visa requirements to enter Togo. This decision effectively immediately is part of the integration vision championed by the authorities, particularly to strengthen economic exchanges and cooperation between African states. It follows an announcement by the President of the Council, Farin Atingbe, at the third edition of the Biashara Africa 2026 Forum, dedicated to accelerating the continent's economic integration. According to the press release, the visa exemption is valid for a maximum of 30 days. However, travelers remain subject to current security, immigration, and public health requirements. Authorities also remind travelers that prior registration on the government immigration platform remains mandatory at least 24 hours before arrival in order to obtain a travel document.
Imo added with that report, we now cross to the Central Sahel region, where the government of Niger has approved the creation of a new state-owned company to manage the country's hydrocarbon pipeline infrastructure. The decision was announced following a meeting of the Council of Ministers on Monday, May 18, 2026.
During the meeting, authorities adopted a draft decree establishing the Nigerian Inland Pipelines Company, known as SNPI. Francis Boniface explains the details.
According to the government, the company will operate as a public limited corporation fully owned by the state. It will also function under Niger's public enterprise laws, including the Ohada Uniform Act on companies' operations. Officials said the Inland Pipelines Company, known as SNPI, will oversee the management, operation, maintenance, and security of oil transport pipelines in the country. As part of its functions, the company will conduct studies related to the expansion and modernization of existing pipeline networks. Among its key responsibilities is to manage the pipeline linking the Agadez oil field to the Zinde refinery, known as Soras, to ensure uninterrupted crude oil transportation. The move forms part of Niger's broader strategy to regain control of strategic infrastructure in the hydrocarbon sector. Authorities say the Agadez to Zinda pipeline has now been integrated into public ownership under contractual provisions related to cost oil agreements.
That was Francis Boniface reporting.
Away from the Central Sahel, we turn to Monrovia, Liberia, where 26 Auditor Generals from across Africa are attending the annual governing board meeting of the African Organization of English-Speaking Supreme Audit Institutions. Liberia's General Auditing Commission is hosting this high-level regional conference for the first time since 2005 when the organization was established.
The conference began on Monday and runs until May 22, 2026, bringing together 26 countries. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Parker reports.
The meeting is expected to deepen cooperation among African sovereign audit institutions and to strengthen efforts to improve transparency and accountability in the management of public resources across the continent. According to Head of Communication at Liberia's General Auditing Commission, Edwin Clark, the conference opened with a 2-day closed-door governing board meeting ahead of the official sessions.
A new dimension in the process of conducting audit is the audit diagnosis. These are some of the steps Auditor General will be discussing to see how best they can transition from the manual perspective to the digital perspective in conducting. So on the AfroSAE program, they have 2 strategic topics that they discuss, which is the governing board meeting.
He says a 2-day strategic review meeting involving all 26 auditors will begin on Wednesday at the ministerial complex. At the end of the gathering, delegates are expected to adopt resolutions linked to AfroSAE's 2025 to 2029 strategic plan, while also reaffirming commitments to stronger audit independence, good governance, and improved public finance oversight in line with the African Union Agenda 2063 framework. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're still listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. We're streaming live on YouTube and on Facebook, and we're also live on wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories.
Nigeria's Economic Crimes Commission arrests former Power Minister Saleh Maman following 75-year conviction for misappropriating state funds.
Professor attending European Union's Erasmus Plus regional workshop calls for reforms in Africa's health sector curriculum.
Togo grants 30-day visa-free entry to African nationals.
An Africa Auditors Conference gets away in Monrovia to enhance regional audit processes. Still ahead in the bulletin, we have guest interview and sports news. Do stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's now talk politics, because reactions are emerging in Côte d'Ivoire following a major announcement by opposition leader Laurent Gbagbo on the future direction of his political party, the PPACI. And over the weekend, the former Ivorian leader said he plans to delegate more responsibilities within the party and expand the roles of young people and women in its leadership structure. Supporters welcomed the move as an effort to prepare a new generation of political leaders.
However, some analysts argue it could allow Gbagbo to maintain influence for the party's internal restructuring continuing. Christopher Atijo tells us more in this report.
Just days before his 81st birthday, Laurent Gbagbo appears to be turning his attention to the future of the PPACI, the opposition party he leads. Over the weekend, Gbagbo announced plans to delegate some of his powers within the party. He says he wants young people and women to play a bigger role in the party's political leadership and decision-making. The announcement has generated mixed reactions within the political circles in Côte d'Ivoire. Some young party supporters have welcomed the move. They see it as an opportunity for a new generation to gradually emerge within the party's leadership structure. But political analyst and journalist Sidiki Traore believes the move is also strategic. According to him, the former president may still be seeking to retain strong influence over the decision of the party, despite delegating responsibilities. The latest development comes amid broader internal changes within the PPACI. Recently, several party officials were expelled. A new leadership team is also expected to be announced in the coming days.
A report by WADR's Marcel Ariston-Blay in Abidjan, voiced by Christopher Aticho.
Now, as Senegalese Muslims prepare for Tabaski, many families are struggling to afford one of the celebration's most important traditions, buying a ram. Economic hardship, rising living costs, and concerns over livestock supply from parts of the Sahel have pushed prices beyond the reach of many households. Sankula Janko visited one of the livestock markets and filed this report.
At several livestock markets in Dakar and surrounding areas, Buyers say prices this year are significantly higher than usual, forcing families to reconsider their spending. Viesane, a father, says he had little choice but to buy a ram on installment after weeks of searching.
Sheep are very expensive this year. I have visited many places, but the prices are almost the same everywhere. In the end, I had to agree to pay in installments and leave the rest to Allah.
For others, even that option remains out of reach. Usman Sonko, a parent at the market, says the rising cost of food, transport, and other expenses has made buying a ram nearly impossible this year.
You can see how expensive sheep have become, and life itself is already very difficult.
Sheikh Sise, another resident, explains that many families are now waiting for sheep imported from Mauritania and Mali, hoping they could afford those.
I still do not have a sheep because I do not have enough money yet. I am waiting for sheep arriving from Mauritania and Mali, as those are the ones I hope to afford.
Vendors also acknowledge the pressure. Elas Maisa, a sheep seller in Dakar, blames rising animal feed costs and restrictions affecting livestock imports from some Sahel countries for the increase in prices.
It is obvious that sheep are expensive in Senegal because local supply is not enough to meet demand. Most of the sheep needed by the population are imported, especially from countries like Mali, and that is one of the main reasons for the high prices.
For many families, Tabaski preparations remain uncertain as economic hardship continues to weigh heavily on household budgets across the country.
Sankule Janko filed that report.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
As promised earlier in the bulletin, our guest interview segment focuses on Sierra Leone's Ebola preparedness efforts following reports of an Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. Recall that Sierra Leone was one of the hardest hit during the previous Ebola outbreak.
Health authorities say the country is now strengthening surveillance, border screening, and emergency response systems to prevent any possible spread of the virus. Harold Thomas is the Risk Communication and Community Engagement Lead at Sierra Leone's Ministry of Health.
A lot of gains have been made and a lot of capacity has been built. So the Ministry of Health 10 years ago is different from what it is right now. We also have an outfit now, the National Public Health Agency, that is specifically there for emergencies and conditions of public health importance. We now have a lot of epidemiologists, we have trained laboratory scientists, and all the core capacities are up and ready to a point that we are also supporting other countries.
What specific weaknesses exposed during the last Ebola outbreak has Sierra Leone prioritized fixing in its current preparedness strategy?
All the core capacities, surveillance and epidemiology, laboratory, medical countermeasures, points of entries, risk communication, even the overall emergency preparedness and response. If you go back and check, the JEE, the Joint External Evaluation by WHO, you will see the scores for Sierra Leone. A lot of significant improvement has been made. Since Ebola, we have fought a lot of diseases like COVID-19, even Mpox.
Would you say that there are concerns about surveillance gaps at unofficial border crossings, particularly with regional population movements remaining high in the region?
Fortunately for us in Sierra Leone, we only have two borders. The border between Sierra Leone and Liberia and the border between Sierra Leone and Guinea. The third border, I would say, is just the sea, the Atlantic Ocean. We have put in place strong cross-border surveillance and we are doing cross-border interactions within myself and my colleagues in Liberia and Guinea, and even Ivory Coast as well, because although we do not have a physical border with Côte d'Ivoire, there is an imaginary border, and we are all part of the Mano River Union. We and making sure that there is strong collaboration. The Public Health Emergency Operations Center is being activated at heightened readiness at alert level 2, and my national emergency health committees have convened, and we have activated all it takes for preparedness at this stage. And the airport we have in Sierra Leone, we have activated enhanced screening at that airport, and even our sea harbor. We are actually putting in place all countermeasures so that we would make sure that we are not caught unprepared. And we have also put on standby a rapid response team. In all of our 16 districts, infection prevention protocols are actually reinforced at all our key facilities. And we are in contact with DRC, Uganda, Guinea, because we all have a counterpart there. So we are getting live updates because, in fact, updates that I had when this thing started was directly for the Africa CDC. We are getting alerts on a daily basis. And we also have our toll-free line, which is actually popular in Sierra Leone.
One major lesson from the previous outbreak was the danger posed by misinformation. How is the ministry addressing public communication differently this time?
We now have what we call BIIM, that is Behavioral Intelligence and Infodemic Management. And we are using social scientific means in making sure that we gauge perceptions of people, we track those rumors in time, and then we counter these rumors and we debunk them, and then we address people's concern.
That was Harold Thomas, Risk Communication and Community Engagement Lead at Sierra Leone's Ministry of Health, and he was speaking to my colleague Veronique Njai. Let's now bring you some sports, where Ghana were drawn in the same group as Cote d'Ivoire when the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying draw was made in Cairo today. Gambia and Somalia compete Group C, and the winners and runner-up of 6 match days between September and March qualify for the tournament. The clash of 4-time winners Ghana and 3-time champions Cote d'Ivoire resulted from Ghana being among the second seeds. Seeding was based on the current world rankings.
Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana and Cape Verde are among 10 African qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup, which kicks off next month in the United States, Canada and Mexico. Cape Verde, whose World Cup qualification at the expense of Cameroon was the biggest shock among the 9 African groups, are in Group K of the AFCON with Mali, Rwanda and Liberia. South Africa are in Group D with Guinea, co-hosts Kenya and Eritrea, with the Kenyans qualifying automatically. The other 3 teams will fight for 1 ticket to East Africa.
Nigeria also in a group from which they will be the only one qualifier apart from co-host Tanzania. Madagascar and Guinea-Bissau complete Group L. Title holders Morocco share Group A with Gabon, Niger and Lesotho. Senegal, the 2025 AFCON runners-up, will face Mozambique, Sudan and Ethiopia in Group J. Morocco lost the dramatic 2025 final to Senegal in Rabat, only to be declared winners after an appeal to the Confederation of African Football, CAF.
The appeal resulted from many Senegal players leaving the pitch after Morocco were awarded an added time penalty. Senegal eventually returned. Brahim Diaz missed a spot kick and Pape Gueye struck an extra time winner. Senegal reacted to being stripped of the title by appealing to the Court of Arbitration for Sport CAS in Switzerland and are awaiting a verdict.
CAF President Patrice Motsepe has repeatedly refuted reports that the 2027 AFCON would be postponed or taken away from co-hosts due to delays in preparations. Now he says the next, which is the 2027 AFCON, is going to be in East Africa during June and July next year. I have no doubts about it, despite all the challenges. And we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much as well to Ismaila Kamara and Maudo Ju for the technical assistance.
Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram and Facebook at WADR English. I am Augustine Cully.
And I am Atia Winimbila. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening.